Okay, welcome everyone to our Spring Sturgeon Moon poetry reading. I'm really excited to see all of you here. We have two fantastic featured readers today and a bevy of wonderful poets in the Peanut Gallery that about 10 of you are going to read at the open mic, and I'm really excited about that as well. Sturgeon Moon Poetry, this is our second year. And the reason we call it Sturgeon Moon Poetry is when we were looking for a name, we did a little research, and the Sturgeon Moon is the August full moon. And we discovered that there are 29, I guess, species or separate categories of sturgeon. 23 of them are endangered. And the story about the sturgeon moon was on the full moon in August, the sturgeon would come to the surface, and Native Americans celebrated it as a way of just raking in the fish, right? It was a real blessing for them. Well, now so many of them are endangered, and Sturgeon Moon embraces all kinds of poetry. Poetry is a big tent, but we particularly highlight lyrical narrative poetry, which is in a way not going extinct, but it's not as popular as it once was. So today we're going to hear some poetry that's a combination of lots of different things, and that's fantastic. But that's how we got the name Sturgeon Moon. So today's agenda is going to be, we'll have our two featured readers read. I will introduce them in a moment, and then we'll have our open mic, and I'll explain about that before we begin. So our first featured reader is Ron Starbuck, and I'm going to read a little bit of a formal bio of his, and then just say a word or two personally about Ron, because I've known him for 8 years. Ron Starbuck is a poet, writer, and publisher, CEO, executive editor of St. Julian Press Incorporated in Houston, Texas. Ron's 4 poetry collections are There Is Something About Being an Episcopalian, When Angels Are Born, Wheels Turning Inward, and most recently, A Pilgrimage of Churches, a mythic spiritual journey in verse and photos that crosses onto the paths of many contemplative traditions. To learn more about Ron and his work, you can check a lot of the links here. There's some St. Julian Press links. There is a press release about There's Something About Being an Episcopalian. There are other press releases here about 2 other books that we'll be talking about today. And then there's some links here on the chat to bookshop.org where you can locate those books. And then finally, there are a couple of links to a couple of poems that Ron is going to be reading. I'd just like to say a personal word about Ron. Ron is one of my editors. Dharma Rain was published by St. Julian Press in 2016. And Ron is one of those editors that is a human being first. Ron is wonderful to deal with as a fellow human being, as a fellow spiritual person, and as a fellow poet and editor. And I just want to shout out to him for all of the great work that he's done with St. Julian Press over the past several years. Some of you in the audience here have books published by St. Julian Press as well, and you know what I'm speaking of when I speak about how wonderful he is to work with. More than that, St. Julian Press stands for, and he can express it better than I can, but it stands for a cross-cultural, cross-spiritual dialogue between many contemplative traditions. And because of that, the work of St. Julian Press goes beyond that of being a mere poetry press or a literary press, but actually engages people from all walks of life and makes the world a better place. So I'm so happy today that we have him, and I'll introduce Fred LaMotte, our other featured reader today, in a moment. And Ron first is going to read a few poems from Kevin McGrath's work. Kevin is a poet that he is known for a long time. I didn't have the opportunity of meeting him, although I do have a review of his latest book, Fame, and I've published the link there on chat if you care to see it. So Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you and welcome you and read some poems from Kevin first, enlighten us about his work. Then we'll have Fred read, and then Ron will close our featured reading with a few of his own poems before the open mic. I introduce Ron Starbuck. Let's give him a big hand.
Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm going to read maybe 2 or 3 poems. We'll see how much time we have of Kevin McGrath. Kevin McGrath was an associate professor at Harvard University. He taught the classics. So, think of all the great Greek literature that make up the classics, and that's what he taught and spent a lot of his time on. He was well-traveled, well-read. We actually published 4 or 5 of his, actually 5 of his books, and we had hoped that he would be here today to read his own work, but last fall he contracted a terminal illness and we lost him in early February, actually early November. And before he passed away, I was working with him on a release of another book, a book of prose called On Friendship, and we were able to get that out before he actually passed away, and he was able to review it and look at it. And then he actually sent me all of his archive material, his literary legacy. So I'm working with his estate and his son Murdo on trying to move forward on getting some of that publication in the next 2 or 3 years. We'll kind of see how that goes. So since Kevin can't be here to read from his book Fame, which was actually published last May, I'm going to read some of the work, and then I'm going to, after I read the first poem, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what is in that poem and what makes it up, and then we'll see if we got time for another one, and then maybe do another analysis on that. This is actually one of my favorite poems. There is a PDF that's attached. It's called Fame Reading, and there's another one called La Campagna del Chiaza. But you can download these. These are just copies of the poems that I'm going to be reading today, and you should be able to see them in the chat, and you should be able to directly download them if you want to look at those and actually look at some of the words. So the first poem I'm going to read is in section 4 of Fame, and it's poem number 10. And these aren't titled other than the fact that we could understand the first line of every poem as possibly a title for that particular poem. So this is, I'll just call it Travelers. Travelers. Travelers can never return to places of perfection. And those who go weeping, a cup of mere grain within their unbarred private heart, endued they are one day with smooth fields of green wheat. Such is time's mobility, the various bones of a skull where 3 expressions tell us of death's weightless threshold, its broad white gateway guarded by 2 patrolling swans. First, a weakening of strength, a creaking of the vessel as sinew and illusion relent. Then, the weariness of loving, always surrendering our souls, knowing we cannot be met. And finally, the quiet admission that we cannot lightly triumph, that victory too is one day closed. Ineptitude of mindless youth, struggles of maturity, and stillness come of slow age, and yet more durable than these, or any stone or hard element, more firm than old songs. Paradise receives our bodies, the useless breath we spoke, telling of inconsequence, even for the unclothed lovers, apprehensive with their bias, the beauty of joying nakedness and those simple words. Only travelers dread paradise, for if we never move our ways, we are not transformed. And the transit of a human soul is more than a world can found, more than even gravity, which supplies our sensory wealth. The grasses and the leaves, the timber of our voyages, children of the future, and how we tell them of our kind. Liberal fields we might describe, where white birds stand guard, and the journey has no end. So what this poem looks at, and I'm sure many of you picked this up, but it just delves into some of the intricate themes of time and change, mortality, and the transcendence of human experience. And it's just woven into a metaphorical journey of travelers. All of us are on a journey. And it's so often in those journeys that we are unable to return to the places of perfection that we once saw. So the poem is rich in this type of symbolic imagery. It's rich in philosophical depth. And it's just basically echoing themes in work and interest and contemplative exploration of life's impermanent and cyclical nature. The poem opens with the assertion that travelers can never return to places of perfection. And that sort of it creates a setting or a tone of impermanence and transformation. And that sense of impermanence is sort of a reflection of the Buddhist understanding of impermanence, as well as the Christian mystic journey towards an unattainable perfection in this life. And the imagery of traveling and never being able to return to that idealized past speaks to basically the human condition. The journey of life itself, travelers as a journey of life. The poem uses lots of natural imagery, like fields of green wheat, bones of a skull, patrolling swans, that serve to guard the abstract themes and the tangible. And then nature just becomes a backdrop for a lot of Kevin's poems. And then it moves on to morality or mortality and beyond, how we confront that mortality directly, and describing it as a broad white gateway that's guarded by swans. So lots of powerful images here. And that sort of aligns with various mystic contemplative traditions that we can pull out from. And then finally, just the human experience and the transformation that life is, and the ultimate transformation we're all gonna experience at some point in our lifetime. Okay, I'm going to go on to poem number 12 in part 12. And I haven't read this through a lot of times, so I will try my best to be as smooth as possible. And the first line of this poem starts with like fireflies. Like fireflies on a summer night, so our nakedness in this world is touched by a river lake. Sea ocean, ulterior clouds, rain streaming in threads. So too, our understanding is circumscribed by being here on a stony earth. We are limited by objective, caught by our wet blood. The void beneath a mask where human lust and sorrow are fast and consume the natural beautiful. Such is our poor dilemma. How solitude perplexes us, the bare extent of time, how we struggle in this mortal and moral silence of imperfection for one simple diamond truth, chromium colored and translucent, the long blue oars of noon as boats return and pass us, how we crave their meaning, and effulgence beyond thought. Undyed we are by daily life, untouched by its meteors. So much procreation, Milky Ways forever folding on a tideless, dry shore. The brackish taste of human love, water of our virginity, thorns hidden by the light that touches so casually, unbreakable shell of darkness, transfigured by affection, or in the cry of snakes, as in our stone room sleeping, We reenact oblivion each night as we embrace. There is a leopard somewhere who now and then reveals sweetness, happiness, and the causeway of freedom. And then we always forget. We know it is there waiting, observing our quiet futility, like a slow, distant thunder on a lovely afternoon, hinting of sudden rainfall. In the unbreakable heat, so we might be remade, so we might be remade. I'm going to go on and read one more. This is poem number 11 in part 4 of the book. It's called The Mystery of Sorrow. The mystery of sorrow and consciousness of private joy. We pretend there are no wounds so we might love more fully the rights of this living. Two souls upon a sand shore, blue lake water at their feet, and all of light suddenly gracious and invisible as it flows and covers them. The years and so much air, small griefs not yet forgotten, love that was never said in profound inner silence, luminous with passion. Life arcs overhead like an ardent lover causing the world below to close, its eyes with pauseless pleasure, the strangeness of distress saying, I have two souls, my love, and I, who keep with me through time. Both are still and know I am, dressed only in bare clothing, woven of their beauty. Years are closely gathered here, bend their necks in submission, and their lives stay and watch as day sings and darkness weeps. Hours run away unnoticed. My soul and I meet each dawn, vanishing so lightly, breathless and unseen, we receive the beautiful transparence of the worldly, where light makes no incision, this being the only kingdom. We are two souls in one who sustain their distinction. Such is the mystery of love's universal promise. Not death or fantasy nor life, nor absolute dismissal can fracture that peace now, where we are joined by ritual, found on humility. I have tried by all means to free of all the years. I have tried by all means to be free of all the years from words and their bodies that captivate as lightly as bronze midsummer grass. So I place these my breasts in your hand like this, loving your exception, candid and unconcealed, its validity unsaid. A circumformed sun arising from saturnine fog catches us in a circle, with yellow serum light revealed and justly naked. The ring a groom prepares to be given for a bride, for no death nor any living can remove from this present what was made without sorrow, what was made without sorrow. So Kevin just basically over and over again, he delves into the complexity of human emotions. He weaves this tapestry of love and sorrow and consciousness itself in those bonds that connect souls through time. Um, his poetry is very, very mystical, and it really explores the depth of human literature and spirituality, um, and all the things that come with it, the duality of human experience, the power of love and connection, the transience of life and our emotions, the transcendence of the spiritual realm, ritual, humility, and release. His poems himself draw from the work of antiquity, which is what he was so familiar with, being a teacher of the classics. Anyway, we're trying to preserve that work, and this is not contemporary modern poetry by any means. It's something in a class all of its own, but it's quite beautiful, and it is worth preserving. I think that's it. We're probably out of time for this portion, Terry.
Thank you, Ron, very much. Thank you for excellent reading, and thank you for giving some insight into Kevin McGrath's work and his life. It's a wonderful homage to him, and I appreciate it. And our next featured reader is Alfred LaMotte. And Alfred has authored 4 volumes of poetry with St. Julian Press, including Strangers and Pilgrims, the most recent, and has co-authored 3 coffee table art books with artist and earth-centered activist Rashani Ray. With degrees from Yale University and Princeton Theological Seminary, Fred has been an interfaith college chaplain, instructor in world religion, and a meditation guide who loves to explore the liminal space between word and silence, poetry and meditation. He lives on the shore of the Salish Sea, hope I said that, near Seattle, Washington, with his wife, Anna. Let's welcome today Alfred LaMotte. And Alfred, if you're not unmuted, unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you. And I think without any further explanation or any other talk, I'm just going to read, except to say that this first poem is very short, and it's the first poem in my book, my latest book, Strangers and Pilgrims. And the other poems that I read are going to be kind of like a response to that first one. Okay, so the first one is called Scary. And I welcome you all here. Thank you for being here. Now, the world is scary. I'm scared. That's the truth. How about you? The world is in chaos, and I refuse to pretend that I know what to do. Do you hear me? I'm scared, and I don't know. Yet when I tell the truth, a sacred white buffalo wanders into my heart, and I feel a peace the world cannot give or take away. Do you hear me? Perhaps this is what we can all do together. Be scared. Don't know. Tell the truth. And this poem is called Ancestry. My DNA results came in just as I suspected. My great-great-grandfather was a monarch butterfly. Much of who I am is still wriggling under a stone. I am part larva, but part hummingbird too. There is dinosaur tar in my bone marrow. My golden hair sprang out of a meadow in Palestine. Genghis Khan is my 4th cousin, but I didn't get his dimples. My loins are loaded with banyan seeds from Sri Lanka, but I descended from Ravana, not Ram. My uncle is a mastodon. There are traces of white people in my saliva. 3.7 billion years ago, I swirled in a hydrogen cloud, dreaming of a planet overgrown with lingams and yonis. More recently, say 60,000 BC, I walked on hairy paws across a land bridge joining Sweden to Botswana. I am the bastard of the sun and moon. I can no longer hide my heritage of raindrops and cougar scat. My mud was molded with your grandmother's tears. I was the brother from another tribe who marched you to the sea and sold you. I was the merchant from Savannah and the cargo of blackness. I was the chain. Admit it, you have wings, vast and crystal, like mine, like mine. You have sweat, dark and salty, like mine, like mine. You have secrets silently singing in your blood, like mine, like mine. Don't pretend that Earth is not one family. Don't pretend we never hung from the same branch. Don't pretend we do not ripen on each other's breath. Don't pretend we didn't come here to forgive. This poem is called Election. It's good for reading this year, I guess. I voted. I voted with a badge. I voted for the rainbow. I voted for the cry of a loon. I voted for my grandfather's bones that feed beetles now. I voted for a singing brook that sparkles under a North Dakota bean field. I voted for salty air through which the wimbrel flies south along the shores of 2 continents. I voted for melting snow that returns to the wellspring of darkness where the sky is born from the earth. I voted for demonic mushrooms in the loam and the old democracy of worms. I voted for the wordless treaty that cannot be broken by white men or brown because it is written in star semen, new moons, thistle sap, and weevil hieroglyphs on prairie oak. I voted for the ancestral bison scrawled on the seeping limestone cavern of your heart. I voted to wash away white and black in a rainbow of tears. I voted to keep the edges of the vineyard ragged and ungleaned for the hungry stranger. I voted for lonely pilgrims who wander in the ambiguous land between male and female. I voted for open borders between death and birth. I voted for the commonwealth of the ancient forest, a larva for every beak, a wing-tinted flower for every moth's disguise, a well-fed mammal's corpse for every colony of maggots. I voted for the mule that Jesus rode into the city, proclaiming forgiveness of all debts, who is the same mule Rumi rode backward into exile, gazing eastward toward eternal loss. That mule, I tell you, will be president. I voted to compost and manure the floor of the Senate, entangling politicians in hemp moss and honeysuckle, turning the dome of Congress into an enormous hummingbird feeder. I voted for a motherland where politics dissolves into folk music, storytelling, fermented cabbage, totem-carved hose handed down from mother to son in the fireside quietness of heroic listening. I voted on the ballot of a fallen leaf of sycamore that cannot be erased, for it becomes the dust and rain, and then a tree again. I voted for the local, the small, the brim that does not spill over, the abolition of waste, the luxury of enough. I voted for more fallow time to cultivate wildflowers, more recess to cultivate play, more leisure, tax-free, more space between our days. I voted to increase the profit of evening silence and the price of a thrush song. I voted for 10 million stars in your next inhalation. Well, maybe there's time for one more. This is called Broken. A broken commandment is the open gate to a wilder meadow. I smoked an Arturo Fuentes Robusto with the Bodhisattva. Asked him if he had any precepts. He said, just one, be healed by your tears. Then he opened up to me about his sadness, admitted he had to come back because he was lonely. I said, maybe Anthony Bourdain or Sylvia Plath. He said, maybe Jack Kerouac. I said, all of them wounded, one-eyed Buddhas. My belly was thirsty for repentance, so I made a bourbon smoothie and shared it with Jesus. Asked him if he had any rules. He said, just one. Call me brother, not Lord. Cucumber, mint, and kale with a shot of wild turkey. Forgive me, it was delicious. A broken commandment is the open gate to a deeper rule, unwritten, harder to disobey. The laws of the body lead to the precepts of the soul. Like the one that says, love anyway. The one that says, make friends with the brokenhearted. The one that says, forgive yourself again and again. So I discover the rules I cannot break by breaking the ones I can. I don't know if you want me to read one more or that's enough, not keeping time.
You have time for one more.
All right, so this is just a fresh one, newly written. Hope you can't hear that gas thing going on outside. This is an Easter poem. Yeah, I have no qualms about speaking in religious terms sometimes. Begins with a quote from C.S. Lewis. Holy places are dark places. It is life and strength, not knowledge and words that we get in them. Holy wisdom is not clear and thin like water, but thick and dark like blood. Unquote. In the core of your heart is a black hole where fierce, immaculate silence submerges the antipodes before they can escape into creation. Worlds bubble out of your loss. The vulva laceration in Christ's side leads to the kingdom of the unborn. Immerse in the bee-drowning cup of this wound. Say yes to the primordial flood. Deeper than sadness, deeper than sin, the darkness you have fallen in. Neither retribution nor injustice have any meaning here. The vintage of love ferments, where pain and beauty commingle in one nectar. Words you used like left and right, doing and not doing, suffering and God, are cinders in the air after a cremation. The poem keeps starting over. In the core of your heart is a black hole a cauldron of swirling stillness. Say yes to the primordial flood, the agony of spring, the passion of petals in a bud. No one can imagine their sorrow. The portal you've been searching for, the infinitesimal bindu between breaths. Now wine pours from the gash in the ribs of the dead poet Jesus. You thought you would rise and fly, but you sink into a secret well of prayer. Your tiny feet, your wings dragging you deeper through the sweetness as you struggle to make a humming sound, but cannot even say thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred, for that. Let's give a acknowledgement to both Fred and Ron. Thank you so much. And Ron, I think you have 2 or 3 poems of your own to read for us, correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna just read 2.
Okay.
All right, a little background information. A few years ago, my wife Joanne and I were in Italy, and we went to Venice and a lot of other places. We flew into Rome and rented a car and drove around the countryside and visited friends who live in Pienza, and took a train from Florence to Venice. And this is some of that experience. So this first poem is titled La Campagna della Chiesa di Vicenza, the church bells of Venice. Somewhere the Venetian moon has hidden itself, and the saddest songs of the seabirds have followed it far out of sight. The gulls soaring high ask with a questioning cry, when will you ever return? We answer smiling, as if to say a part of us remains always, even now, a vision, a sound, our many dinner conversations, embedded like a seashell in the stone steps where we walked. The church bells of Venice have the longest memories, we believe. We linger in time, endlessly listening to their sacred sounds, ringing as they have for centuries, each bell in its own solitary voice. Although some may say the sea remembers even more, as moon and tide pull us back into ourselves. We hear the bells marking history with a sound of laughter and sorrow both, of yesterday stretched along moments uncovered in intimate interludes, each day unfolding fully, tomorrow patiently waiting as an actor in the wings, begging us to remember each step taken on the ancient stone streets where 10,000 steps are taken and cross each other each day, passing by one place or another with a sigh, a troubled lament felt as we stroll hand in hand over each bridge and canal. There is so much to see, so many memories that enter into our sight. We are haunted by those who have walked here before. We are moved by the remembrance of an ancient beauty, layered now upon the bones of our own memories, and the sad, sad songs of the seabirds calling us back, and the sad, sad songs of the seabirds calling us back. So this next poem also comes from, well, both these come from a book called There's Something About Being an Episcopalian. There's a section in there that's just about poems and poetry and experiences. But this next poem is called Voices. And while we were traveling through Italy, we would often go to churches because I'm one of those people who loves churches. And my wife, Joanne, had a close friend whose husband was seriously ill at the time. And every church we started and stopped in, she lit candles at that particular church. So you'll hear some of that reference in this particular poem. It's titled Voices. Voices, voices, like the poet Rilke, with each breath taken I have heard and half heard the angels calling out from the depths. Let them speak as the whisperings of holy messengers in the unfathomable nighttime before dawn, upon the air and a quickening of flesh. These are the forgotten memories we may all one day recall, more often than we suspect, subtle and obscure, traveling on countless pathways of neural light, crossing our thoughts with distant remembrances that arise out of the silence of the saints. These are the voices I heard once before in a church north of Pienza when we traveled in Italy. Where lighting a candle and bowing her head, Joanne offered, with a sad smile and a small hope, prayers for a close friend who was ill at the time, struggling in life and in death as we all do. In every church and chapel we entered that journey, she repeated the ritual, and in each one I heard the same order of murmuring voices. Not that I could understand their musings, far from it, since they spoke only in hushed tones, in the ineffable and intangible tongues of angels in heaven. Verse after verse follows each breath we breathe. They flow in as a chorus, every word coming quickly, expressed ever so faintly, not always distinct, flowing sensuously over the body like soft fallen rain running over the earth and washing away, vanishing. And then they return in a shower of lyrics, in a moment or even years later, each word rushing in with such haste, anxiously waiting in expectation to take its place. Out of this silence, the poet within conceives unknown, unheard languages of the spirit. New words and verses flowing out unhindered as a blessing, encompassing the wonder of life and the waters of mnemosyne that pour forth. Let the memory speak. Each poet writes in their own angelic tongue, and humankind listens, or they do not. Do you? Sometimes the angels speak too fast, and they are rarely kind or generous in their time. We cannot write the words down quickly enough. Something is always left unwritten. Words and images, thought after thought, come and go on. It all overflows, and you can never know what the angels may honestly want you to write, since they do not speak plainly. You must seek the beloved. Only she can translate such language as a muse, and something more dwelling within us. It is truly unexpected how even the stars fall silent in her presence. One day soon, we will all become fluent in her angelic tongue. One day soon, we will all become fluent in her angelic tongue.
Thank you again, Ron. Let's acknowledge Ron and Fred again. Thank you so much for featuring for us today. And Ron, thank you for giving up some of your time to read some of Kevin's work as well. That was very well done. Okay, it is time for our open mic. And I just wanted to mention also, both Ron's book and Fred's book and Kevin's book, there are links about them in the chat. And if you care to buy one, I'm sure you can find a way to buy one of those books by going onto those links. So it's time for our open mic, and I am delighted that we have a number of poets today that I am anxious to hear read. I haven't heard read in quite some time. We have 10 poets listed for our open mic. I think probably everyone on this call would be capable of reading very well for us one of your poems. There's simply not time. So if I'm not calling your name today, if you've not been solicited or signed up for the open mic, please email me at lucas.t274@gmail.com. I'll put that up. And I will put you down on the list for the open mic for our next Sturgeon Moon. And that date has not been announced yet, but email me ahead of time and I'll get you on our list for the next time. So to open up our open mic today, and the guidelines for the open mic, I'm going to ask one poem. And I'm going to introduce you. If you have a book, a recent book out, please tell us that book. I will remember some of them, but not all of them. But please just read the poem for sake of brevity, and so we can move along. And the first reader I'm going to ask to read is Michael Jamal. MJ, what are you reading for us today, MJ? I see you. There you go.
I have good internet. I don't want it to freeze up. Come on.
Oh, we can't hear you. Oh my God.
I got low network. Okay. I'm sorry I can't put a picture up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
I'm reading prologue from
bouncing around.
a series of poems of It Began. Oh, it came up. Okay. This is called this prologue. There's about 14 pieces in this. So I'll just read it. It began when I accidentally stepped on your left foot into excuses. Because love without a fuse of lights flashing. There's something that might come. I'm not who I say I am. I've been patching myself together for years. I'm brand new. If I put on my best pants, you dance with tonight. I have so many stories in my pocket. Have you ever seen inside the body of a meaningful thought? There are so many shades of despair. I'm almost ready to shout.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MJ. We caught most of that. Some of it was a little garbled. I'll just mention that MJ has a book forthcoming from Blue Light Press. It's a chapbook that won a prize from Blue Light Press, and it is called It Began. That's the prologue to it. So I invite you to check MJ out. His work is very strong, and appreciate your reading today. I'm sorry you had a bad connection. So our next reader is going to be my dear friend and fellow Trailhouse Press founder, Dorinda Wegner. She has a new book out entitled Four Fields from Trailhouse Press. And Dorinda, I'm excited to hear you read today. What do you have for us?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, sweet. I have one poem for you. It's from the collection Four Fields, which is out in July of this year. And it is about my father. I cared for him while he was passing from dementia. And it's entitled, The Speed of Light Does Not Follow Any Acceptable Form of Logic. My father is outside the locked ward and my sister. Both my sisters and my brother. Our father keeps his coat on at all times. My father is in a world where I am his mother. My husband is the man from the laundromat. My brother-in-law is the man from the bank. The light we can see in tonight's sky is from stars already left. The light we can see and the coat. The nurses at the locked ward will quickly jump and run the length of their stations to sound the alarm. When my father left this world, he stayed in this world. He will not be in this world again. Everyone wants him to be in the locked ward with his coat except for him. Our father is unhappy here. Father wants to be folded into a neat, tight triangle of stars. The light we can see. It is tired. It has traveled a very long way. It wants to come in and remove its coat. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dorinda. It's good to hear you read again. It's been a long time. It's been too long. Okay, next I'm going to ask my friend Indigo Moore if he will read. I haven't heard him read in a long time. And Indigo, I've lost track of your publications. So tell us the last book you've published and tell us what you're reading for us today. Let's see, are you unmuted?
Oh God, you think I'd be better at that? My last book is Everybody's Jonesing for Something. I have another book out, but I'm not going to read from that. I'm going to read from the Sisyphus Club. I wrapped 2 peacocks in silk and hit the train yard, betting all night hoboing will melt you into my arms. The conductor's a lazy eye stuck skyward, transfixed to the supermoon, blood orange plopped to the night stir of bitters and stars. I'm curled up, pill-bugged into a steamer. Moonlight, frisbees off my back, puddles into the corner, vibrating off wicked dust. In 30 minutes, I'll steal up the ladder to your room, silent as a wave shaking wind off its back, whispering something sweet and wintry into your ear. It'll goose walk down to your dreams, plant a blood rose in your hands like a flag, like a vow. Know this, the salt kiss from my lips stains every petal. By the time you wake, I'm back on the train, your smile tucked into my coat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Indigo. It's great to hear you read again. It's been too long. Thank you for coming today. And
It has been a while. Thank you. Yes.
yeah, it has. Okay, Brian Martins, I have you listed next. Brian, what are you going to read for us today?
Yeah, it's from my manuscript. It's called Thanks, Billy. And my first book is, oh, you can't see that. It's Three Raven Gate. It's my first book, but this is from a manuscript I'm looking to get published. Thanks, Billy, for writing a poem about Paris in January, biking, sitting in Paris cafes. In my local cafe, I sat looking at stuttering stoplights, weeds growing through cracked concrete, certainly not Paris. I ordered my coffee with an extra dollop of people speaking French, of course, but it was nothing like an authentic French press or espresso sitting in Paris. Coffee in hand, I approached a tall round table where you can stand and drink or sit in a tall chair. But sitting in this chair required you to climb a small ladder to seat yourself. Once seated and elevated, I felt transported to French airspace, hearing the air traffic controller in her marvelous French accent, clearing me to occupy this seat. She knew my aircraft number, Java 3279er. This is Paris Control, I heard her say, cleared for a holding pattern at table number 10. Her voice magnificent and caring as I sat thinking of Billy in Paris. Dreaming of your vision, I watched people mostly hustling, looking busy, not gaily walking, chatting as the French would. The French would be intently exploring each other in conversation with occasional public displays of affection called kissing in Paris. I imagine you watching kissing in narrow streets, in parks, next to statues of Greek gods and goddesses, in cars stopped briefly at stoplights, between tall buildings, and in full view of the Arc de Triomphe. Elevated and far away, I imagine walking over a bridge across the Seine. I would stop midpoint, look down over the retro-extinct railing at the flowing river of life and drop a portion of spit over the railing. Watch it dive for the river, split into competing blobs, and hit the water at the same time, which would cause a sacre bleu to erupt from the closest Frenchman. Unacceptable to the French, we would do this as Midwest kids, competing for the biggest blob. The day at my cafe was not as cold as your day in January, but I felt a cold chill thinking of you riding your bike in the Paris streets. Thoughts of poetry, people, and unfinished poems. We would compare notes on kissing, unfinished poems, women in dark rooms, and spitting over the railing of bridges spanning the Seine. I had no rules for the day, only wanting to feel Paris as you did. Pigeons occupying every edge of buildings. They watch you watching them. The last chill I felt was sitting on my elevated chair, imagining myself in a holding pattern over Paris, hearing that French voice of the air traffic controller, my lips embracing a cold cup of coffee. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. Okay, Elizabeth Cohen, I haven't heard you read in quite a while. What are you reading for us today, and what's your latest book? Let's see, have you unmuted?
I'm going to read a short poem that's not in any book, but my two most recent books are Martini Tattoo and Wonder Electric. This poem is called Weather Vane. My mother's elbow could sometimes tell us when it was going to rain or stop raining, or if a day might stumble into sudden cold or heat. My father made a joke once that she would probably know before a volcano erupted or a meteor struck the earth. He'd laugh and ask her elbow questions, like where he left his wallet or the car keys. And I sometimes wonder if her elbow ever warned her about what happened later, the way his mind emptied of her and everything, as if hit by a meteor, caught unprepared in driving rain, frozen shut in an ice storm, or left in some pocket of a coat he'd accidentally left on a train.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's good to hear you read again. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming today, and thank you for reading.
Thanks for inviting me.
Jan Fraser, would you read us a poem, please, and tell us what you're reading?
Okay, thank you. My poem is called The Underside, and it's in a manuscript that I'm working on. The Underside. Down the path to Narvaez Bay, you take the turn for Monarch Head. Tread uphill past quiet stand of alder, where forest fronds unfurl. En route, lens in hand, your inner child lingers, dips hands into forest litter, probes tangled roots adrift in microscopic wonder. Sifting rainbow layers, you hear webs of fungi humming, fragile strands connected below the surface. You lean down to magnify the masses, a dozen species mingling on one single rock. Tiny primeval forests, lush with emerald wands. There's more light today than shadow. Sun etches trail, upper branches weave a portal. You long to know the workings of this place, where life and death engage a fragile world of opposites in ceaseless repetition.
Thank you very much, Jan. Always good to hear you read and see what you're going to bring to us. I didn't see Lalit Kumar. Lalit, are you here? Lalit signed up, but I didn't see him come in. Are you here, Lalit? I don't see you. Okay. Next time, Lalit has a new book out. He lives in the Bay Area, I believe. Okay, David Watts, what are you reading for us today?
Well, I'm going to read from a book that Ron published last fall,
I was hoping you would.
very beautifully. I have great gratitude for having this come to market. Read one poem. Father, Son, and Dishes in the Sink. Would you help your father unload the dishwasher, she says, and Gabriel turns his feet from the strong magnet, pulling him to the sanctity of his room, where his parallel universe lives, and he will descend into the unreachable. He stretches a hand and lifts a spoon to its place among the community of spoons in the drawer. I squeeze 5 plates together to move to the cabinet. He does the same. I reach for the mixing bowl and our fingers touch, and my father is in the spaces between us, humming his tone-deaf tune as he tilts a glass into its perfect slip. I have watched him turn the glass just so among the elders standing like sentries on the shelf. And now my son watches me, imitating the reflection of my father down through the generations. 2 of us working, and the dishes disappear 3 times as fast, and he is gone to his world that pulls him gently away. It's fine. He carries with him my father and me, and more I will never know.
Thank you, David, for reading for us today and for coming.
My pleasure.
Yes. And next, I'm going to ask Catherine Clark Sales, another physician poet, another St. Julian Press poet. What do you have for us today, Catherine?
I'm reading a poem out of, this is also from St. Julian, The Telling, the Listening, with great thanks to St. Julian Press. Obad, I remember Sunday mornings when hospital rounds started late and I could awaken to the clock of sun striped across the bedroom wall, early light of May, a rosy stain of color to your face, asleep, worry lines unfurled into a younger you, for all the early silver in your hair, your lower lip gentled, waiting for my wake-up kiss. But I love to watch you sleeping, curled against my hip, sleepy murmured protest, blanket-burrowed resistance to the mirrored dawnlight blinkered in your eyes, pulling you from sleep to fractious day. I watched the return of creased discontent as you tucked away a boy so kissable, and I took up my own armor for the day.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. Good, always good to hear you read. And next, Scott Dalgarno. So glad you're here today. What are you reading for us?
I've got something, just my most recent poem about something whimsical about living in Portland, where I am in Portland, Oregon. It's called Winter Sunday in Portland with Franz. Dreaming I'm the Virgin Mary, I wake in a sweat when Gabriel auditions me for a role in the Nativity. Remembering that Giotto painted angels using sketches he'd made of sheep, I skip Mass and head to my favorite art supply store in the Pearl. Afterwards, I stroll over to Powell's, where I hear my name on public address. Kafka is waiting for you in the rare book room. Famished, Franz and I split a Reuben at Kornblatt's. We discuss snowfall in the city how one crow and her shadow equal two blackbirds. Passing on dessert, we Ubered a vast forest park to glory in the winter canopy. The emerald damp elevates me. Kafka is a tall man, sitting, his fingers scrape the ground, which, like branches of the avocado, begin to root themselves in the loamy soil. Like my Sheltie resisting a pedicure, my friend withdraws his nails repeatedly, nibbling off the fresh tendrils. I do my best to pretend I don't see this. You'd expect it of Thoreau, maybe Rachel Carson or Anthony Bourdain, but Kafka? I ask after his fiancée. Which one, he asks. I tell him about my dream and the rude propositions angels are capable of. Franz nods, confessing that sex for him is just as disturbing, that he prefers to pay for it in cash instead of love. I feel like I might make an Oregonian of him until we grab espressos at Stumptown and Franz sucks his through a cube of brown sugar.
Thanks, Scott. Always good to see you. Always good to hear you read.
Thank you, bud.
And the last person I have on my list is Gary Lilly. I've got to tell a quick story about meeting Gary because I haven't heard Gary Lilly read poetry. Goodness, it's at least 15 years. But I met Gary in Chicago. When I moved to Chicago to start working on my MFA program at Columbia College Chicago, my professor at New Mexico State University, Keith Wilson, said, if you go to Chicago, you've got to look up Gary Lilly. Now, I don't know whether there are 5 million people in Chicago, something like that. The very first week I was in Chicago, I went to Molly's, Gary, what's Molly's name? That Molly's restaurant? It was a pub, Molly's pub.
Yeah, it's a pub, but the reading was the Molly's. It was
Yeah,
something, yeah.
So I just go to this reading at random. And of course, you know, I read at the open mic and I got up and read. I don't remember if Gary read first, but he was sitting right beside me. After I read, you know, he said something about, oh, I really liked your treatment of the line. And I said, oh, I really liked your treatment of the line. Where'd you learn to do that? And he said, oh, you know, a poet I studied with called Keith Wilson. I said, no way. I said, he was my college poetry professor. What's your name? He said, Gary Lilly. I said, oh my gosh. I said, Gary, he told me to look you up when I came to Chicago. So I didn't know that I'd find him sitting right beside me at an open mic among 5 million people. And I haven't seen you in 15 years. And I just got to say, Gary's a great blues guitar player and look forward to hearing you read. You need to come back and bring your guitar and play blues guitar for us next time, okay?
Love to.
What are you reading for us today, Gary?
I'm gonna read a poem from a new manuscript stuff called Raven on the Mourner's Bench.
Okay.
And so yeah. And thank you for mentioning Keith. It brings something to me every time I hear that name. But then, yeah, okay. The poem is Nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness. And that comes from the 91st Psalm. This is a poem that's about my brother's traumatic brain injury as a result of a car accident and how it altered him and altered our entire family. It was like this, a dark day, a day dark with storm when everyone was quiet, sitting in the kitchen because God is speaking. But my dead younger brother spoke because he didn't have any quiet. No quiet, no quiet. I had no quiet in my head or anywhere else. No quiet bodily or of the mind. Not a quiet boy like he used to be. He told my sanctified mother, God didn't save me. No, not God. But when he was dead in his coma, he insisted on death, his very own death, as only he could know it. So it must have been, he claimed, it had to have been the touch of the damn devil's hand brought him back. Devil lifted me right out of death. No trouble to him. He good at cheating death. It was then he had to leave us. It was then he had to leave my mother's house. And my mother loved him. He was hers and of her, but she was afraid of the darkness of his demon. She was sorrowful, afraid of his demon, afraid of the roaring she felt she could hear of his demon. And although she knew it was his demon, how could she be sure it wouldn't come out, wouldn't walk among her household, tear at the sanity of her grip on a godly world, and her passage through it, not with a demon, not one living with one, her beloved son. He believed he had been saved and left to wander, enduring the world like one continual eviction. A seamless man asked again and again to get the hell out of anybody's doorway. His mind a river, a beautiful terror of never apologized river, riven patches where no mother could put her arms around him to take him in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you. And I want to say thank you to everyone who read today. First of all, let's give it up again for our featured readers, Ron Starbuck and Fred LaMotte, and for every one of you who came and participated by listening and supporting poetry today and by reading in the open mic. This has been quite a celebration today. It's been a celebration of the word. It's been a celebration of poetry. It's been a celebration of life. It's been a celebration of connection. I know all of you, and you don't know one another, okay? And I'm amazed at the dialogue that has taken place today between these poems and between us all. And so I really appreciate you. And I will let you know when our next Sturgeon Moon Poetry reading is. And if you want to read at the open mic, please email me. I hope we have even more people next time. But this has been fantastic. Give yourselves a big hand. And thank you once again. And don't forget to look at the chat, at these links. You know how difficult it is to sell poetry, right? Because most of you have poetry books you're trying to sell. So support our poets today and buy these books, okay? Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks to poets who didn't read, but who came anyway.
Absolutely. Everyone could have read. It's just a matter of time. Everyone could have read. So send me an announcement next time and I'll put you on the list. Thank you very much. Thanks, folks. Good to see all of you. Have a good week. Bye-bye.